Blind Shovel, an arts and music podcast. Today I speak with father and musician Nick Morris. Enjoy.
Nick Morris, Morris, Nick Morris, Nick Morris, 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 Nick Morris, Nick Morris, Morris, Nick Morris.
Yo,
Michael,
Nicholas,
greetings.
how are you?
I'm good. How are you, man?
I'm all good. Where you at?
I'm on the Harlem River Drive, stuck in traffic.
Oh, we're doing it like that.
Yeah, man. Clear view of Yankee Stadium.
Wow.
Yeah.
You been making music?
No, I've been destroying it.
Really? It sounds like it takes less time.
Yeah, I have my kid do it. He takes the old records and throws them across the room.
Like the old Flower Girl records?
No, like doubles of Beatles stuff.
So you're encouraging your children to destroy things.
More like allowing it.
There's no difference, is there?
Well, encouraging is like, I actually talked about this with, you haven't even met my kid, right?
No, I don't think I have. You have one kid or two kids?
Isn't encourage, I have two kids now. Isn't encourage a weird word? It's like,
It's a beautiful word.
Yeah, it's like to give power, right? Or to give bravery.
To give courage, yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know how much power there. It's just lazy. It's just laziness.
Straight up, yeah. You know, one thing I was thinking about, and this is what we can center the interview around if you're comfortable with it, is you're the only person I know of who, because they decided to become a healthier person, in some ways it was hard for them to continue making the work they were making. And by that, I just remember you kind of like you weren't drinking anymore and getting yourself together in a certain sense. And that made it harder to continue. I think it was Flower Girl at the time, but does that make sense? Is that true?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
And that's just really interesting.
How did you know that?
Well, you told me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's at least for public consumption. There's
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think Emily Dickinson talked about. Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Sure. I think it's a real dichotomy that's, especially if you're a performer, that is hard to balance in a society that enjoys a certain type of debauchery. And that art is often.
You know who did that?
Well, if you think about it, right, if an artist decides I'm not going to drink anymore, like a visual artist, it's not going to change much, I don't think. Like they're still in their room alone making stuff. Probably for the better, you know? And then if you're a musician, I think it's a rare beast that says, all right, I'm going to like become sober suddenly. And it has a different dynamic for musicians. There's just like a lifestyle that's there that isn't there for an artist. And I'm sure it's tempting in a certain sense. But yeah, I don't think of another artist that I know who at least had that stark of a transition. You know, like in my eyes, your life is probably cartoonified because I don't see you that often, but there's like a clear division in the two chapters where now you have two kids. I assume you're still sober. I don't know. And then before it wasn't like a rock star lifestyle, but it was something of that nature. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I'm still sober. Got 2 kids. Um, and yeah, it's funny. I have. I'm not like in a recovery program or anything. So I've there almost was as sudden of a transition from like this identity of a sober person into just like it's the saddest into like the just I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? And there's 2 of us. Don't tell.
Is that what that's what they make you say in those programs?
Yeah. No, that's what Emily Dickinson said.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say.
Yeah, it's like how dreary to be somebody, And,
No, I feel the complete opposite, but I haven't read much of Emily, to be honest.
Well, she didn't publish her shit in her lifetime because she thought that there was no dignity in having her art public, and that she maintained her dignity by maintaining a private art world.
Is it one of those classics, tell your friend who's actually going to release your material to never release your material and then die examples? Because I love that move where you're like, you tell the one person you know is going to publish everything posthumously to not do it. And then you seem really noble. And then they're like, well, I had to do it. I wasn't going to destroy everything.
Yeah. I'm not telling you right now to release all of my shit when I die.
But in terms of, so explain to me that evolution of, I mean, I think I talk to a lot of people, right, who the work they make transitions for a multitude of reasons. Sometimes it just transitions from more personal to commercial work. Some people have no shame about it. Some people are totally comfortable with it. Some people enjoy the shift. Some people have kids, and for that time period, the early time period, it's hard for them to make work. Where are you at with all that?
Yeah. So the kind of drastic, it was more that I kind of like, in the most positive sense, I kind of joined a cult that wasn't AA, it was Zen Buddhism. And I just went extremely hard into like being a Zen student, dedicating really just like my time and energy to that instead of music. And I was angry and militant initially because I was working kind of as an artist with like a lot of just grief and shame, and kind of working from this core belief of I am nobody, and I need to be somebody, right? And I need you to love me because I'm not unloved. So like, not because I'm not loved was like the core belief that was behind all of my work, especially as like a love songwriter, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of like, like Hank Williams, like he didn't actually like have all these lovesick feelings, like he just told. And that is, but then people like, I think Towns Van Zandt was actually like truly a troubled lovesick puppy, and I was
yeah.
That was just my little kid, and it wasn't so dark also, like there is a lot of beauty and joy and that inner child who's expressing himself in he's ultimately what turned into just like a debaucherous, what you said, kind of rock star way. But I remember at one point I was like early in my Zen immersion, I was like I was still kind of like cold turkey from everything that my life had been before, except for my, Isabel, my partner. Um, and um, I was just talking to this guy, and um, we were talking about music, and I said, like, he was a musician, and I said, well, um, I was talking about my path, and I said, well, I know that music isn't everything, and he said it can be, and that was good because I was just recreating this kind of dualistic idea um, about this kind of mystery.
Hmm. Well, I don't know what you mean. I feel that I've increasingly grown away from the vernacular of Zen in my brief kind of. All I can say is I dip my toes, and I'm an avid dualist. Really love duality, but in a weird way that maybe is Zen. Like I feel that it's only through the clear categorization and expression of the dualities that you can transcend them, that you can find the poetry between them. In other words, like if you create a stark black and white and kind of like there's only room for poetry to exist in the recognition of those, in recognition of that dynamic. I don't know if that makes sense. Um, I feel that ultimately a lot of it's the same in the end, but it's certainly a very different path semantically and symbolically. So, what does it mean that music can be everything?
Hmm.
Or what does it mean to you? Because I feel like Zen is like this really, I feel like even asking that question is improper. But at least for you in that moment, what did it relieve you of or represent for you? Because I mean, it can be, sure, this is true, but it also doesn't seem to be anymore. I mean, I have a similar experience where like art is absolutely not everything for me, and I'm a better person for it objectively.
Yeah.
I don't know if the residue I leave behind will be better, but I sense that it will be in the holistic sense, but maybe not in just strictly artistic sense.
Well, I think just in that moment of my own evolution or whatever, it was I had I had kind of broken up with music, and I was like, music is nothing anymore.
Okay, like reactively extreme, one or the other. Okay, yeah.
And just that in that moment, it opened up this idea, and I think that there is like this kind of there can be you know like there are these ideals of art and music and whatever Zen um, that uh, that there's some kind of sublime
Mm-hmm.
component um, and uh, you know I'm definitely attracted to that idea. I used to like there was like also like this classic Zen kind of warning against like transcending. Like Zen Buddhists don't like transcendental meditation because you're not supposed to you're not supposed to go beyond anything. You're just supposed to be right here all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And but there's still just something kind of I want to like I want to honor that desire for that transcendent sublime mystery that I think a lot of people touch like um and can be and um you know
No, I'm fucking with you. Yeah, I get it. I mean, a lot of Zen feels like it's mostly about semantic traps. Like if you get hung up on transcending, it will likely stand in the way of transcending. I don't even know. I mean, let's I don't want to talk about Zen. Is that fair?
Yeah.
I feel like talking about Zen almost doesn't work, if that makes sense.
It doesn't.
But
To depict it in literary form is to stain it with defilement.
I think that's fair, especially in a podcast. What a disgusting combination.
I just plagiarized.
That's fine. It doesn't matter in Zen. Nobody's anybody. There's no plagiarization. All right. So you have these, like, I'm kind of curious what happens between the two things, right? Because that's a big identity shift from what I assume, at least as I knew you as primarily a musician. Obviously, we washed dishes together briefly. So we had those identities as well. But what is the impact of that? And what is the desire to, like, if you see a great musician doing something, is there a desire to become it again? Or are you completely content with the kind of speed and trajectory of life in that sense? Like, if it happens again, it'll happen. Or does it continue to happen just in a private sense?
Yeah. No, I don't feel. It's kind of like, kind of feels. I don't know. Like you went to college, right? Did you go to college?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you miss college sometimes, but also,
Kind of. Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
but when you go back, it feels kind of like, I don't know if you've ever been back to your college, but it feels kind of weird.
Yeah, I think I've been back to high school and gotten that sense. Like, this is a chapter I was supposed to move beyond. And if I were to step back into it for whatever reason, whether to leverage the knowledge I didn't know then that I know now, it would be disingenuous or immoral somehow.
Yeah. So it feels kind of like that, and I've only performed at weddings, and
That's cool.
yeah. So like, if a friend asks me to do something, I'll do it. I used to get really bad stage fright, and that's still, that like even still happens at the wedding. So that was just, that was that I was that was one of the things why I drank so much performing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't, miss that part of the, just like the performance anxiety and dread of being,
To you, does that suggest you're not supposed to do something if you need to drink to do it?
No, I think a lot of people can do it, and it's okay.
No, I mean just you.
Maybe,
You in that context. Yeah, like, I'm mostly trying to understand your relationship. Like, we're painting a fairly negative picture, but I sense that there's something bigger. But I do agree that, at least for me as well, like, I started to look at the limiting factors outside of art making when considering where my life was going to go around like late 20s. Like, sure, I can keep digging down this path, but am I going to be a worse off human? And are the people around me going to be worse off as well? And I thought that was a definitive yes, which is no indictment of art making. It's an indictment of how I make art, or how I made art, which isn't talked about enough, and why I think it's an interesting conversation. Like, it sounds like you're framing your music making as a seeking for attention or love, but surely it's a little more complex and beautiful than that, right?
Maybe, like, yeah, I think it's okay to who does, like, I think seeking attention and love can be beautiful. Like, what else, you know?
Mhm.
Like, I think that gets a bad rap, as if needing love is is something that, you know.
I think it's not that, but it's you should not seek love from consumers or like I think there's proper ways to go down that path, you know.
Yeah.
And maybe the indirectness of art and music is like a pretty unhealthy way to do it because ultimately, I mean, there's a false sense of knowing each other, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you have like the Cobain versus Mercury way of relating to your audience, I think, where obviously it seems like Kurt Cobain really felt a disconnect there and Freddie Mercury loved every second of it. So I've always found that strange too, like who your work attracts, you know, and who is loving you and in what way are they loving you.
Yeah.
But let's talk about what you made too, in a spirit of celebration.
Sure.
So, are you from DC? Is it DC?
Yeah.
What a weird place to be from. Talk about a non-place. It's not even it's just a strange liminal space.
Yeah. And in that sense, it's like the completely normal place to be from.
Yeah, true.
At least something of us.
Yeah, for like it's like being from an American suburb, which I'm from. It's not so different. But when did music enter into the picture? Because I find that if we're talking this kind of psychological game, I find that if it starts young and it validates your existence, it usually sticks pretty long, but it can also often evolve into what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I was kind of a late bloomer. But you know, I got a bass guitar when I was in 8th grade or so, and my friend, you know, I thought it was really cool that my friend Dave was so good at guitar, and I wanted to, you know.
Are we talking Van Dusen?
Dave Van Dusen.
The Dusens.
And I, you know, I was you know, this little stoner kid with a Beatles haircut and liked classic rock, and but then I didn't really, you know, I was pretty learning disabled, so I actually I didn't really know how to play anything, which actually was like to my creative advantage when I actually did start playing more frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like in my senior year of high school, and at that point I started playing with Dave and Henry Van Dusen, and then went to college, and you know, drugs and played a lot of music. It's like you know.
It's funny how music.
Interesting material.
No. We'll spin it. We'll spin the yarn. I think it's interesting how music and drugs. I don't know. I'm always interested in the dichotomy of music and art, and to be honest, I think there's so many more traps in the world of music that are far more tempting and get much more commingled than just sitting in a room making stuff. I think there's other kind of hermetic traps that are very much like non-traps, but music, it seems like pretty hard to do it right, all things considered.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think when I was just making shit on like my shitty computer on GarageBand, and then going to Dave and Henry's basement during the summer and getting, high and playing. But I was so I was so devoted. I was so devoted to like just making shit that I actually don't I didn't feel trapped. Like looking back in those at that early kind of nascent creative period, it's like I was a baby that didn't know anything, and just the shit that came out was so bizarre and like weirdly, it was so bad, but it was also so kind of like untainted by any that you know that was interesting. But as I kept playing, I became a little bit, not much more skilled, and I was actually like able to perform without people like leaving the venue.
The room, yeah, that's a good place to end up.
And but really, I was just faking it for a long time. Yeah, I don't know if that gets to anything. I don't even remember what you asked.
Nor do I at this point. I've been wiped. Well, I think I was asking about, well, in general, what you made, like what that life was like. And obviously it was Flower Girl, the doozies.
Yeah. In college, there was Sleepy Feet. That was
Sleepy Feet.
Yeah, that was a really sweet band. My God, it was like yeah. Remember Scott?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, Scott.
of course.
Scott. It was basically Scott and I writing songs, but we were in Claremont, California, which is actually like a folk capital. It's where it's where like Ben Harper is from, and his family is kind of this folk music dynasty. And so we had all these like weird. We had access to these kind of amazing instruments. Like Scott had this like beautiful banjo that he got from the folk music shop in Claremont, and we were just kind of like, well, here we are in the desert tripping on mushrooms and getting wasted every day and making this kind of bizarre like bluegrassy folk sloppy style music, and we made an album at Scott's house, at Scott's parents' house in Pasadena, and our friend Jake Falby, who I don't know if you ever crossed paths with Jake. He's a really gifted violinist.
I don't think I have, no.
I think ours was the first album he produced, but he's gone on to produce these amazing records. The band Mutual Benefit and Julie Byrne, and he just kind of had he had an amazing ear, and he and Scott are like bona fide musical geniuses, and um, and it was, I still listen to that stuff, and I'm like, man, this is this is crazy good. So that, you know that's sweet to have that, um, and a lot of it was really bad too. But there were a couple of good songs. Um, and then it was kind of like West Coast, East Coast, where Dave and Henry were like doing their thing in the Doozies brother band, garage, um, basement, kind of power pop, awesome stuff. Like, it's really, their stuff is just the best to me. I still listen to it all the time. And there was remember, there was one, I stole a riff of Dave's that got into a Sleepy Pete song,
Mhm.
and I was playing music at Dave's one stone summer night in DC, and he was like, "Nick, let me play you a song I wrote," and he plays uh, this little song, and he sings a line, "Sleepy feet's torn while I'm at home snoring," and then he plays the riff that I ripped from him, and I was like so high, and he just kind of glares at me, and I was like, "Oh fuck, Dave, Dave hates me." I was always really intimidated by Dave because he's just this incredible guitarist. He's so mean, and he was always just such a meanie. And but he also, like, we got together, um, and kind of picked up on where Scott and I kind of tried to create something after Sleepy Feet, which was like the early days of Flower Girl.
Mhm.
And we had started in Oakland, and like artist loft, and
Oh, I recall. Full of cat shit, literally.
yeah, that's where we met you.
Well, we met because I taught you how to dishwash at Pepples.
Donut Farm.
That's right. And then, yeah, I remember you living there. Beautiful place.
You didn't teach me very well because apparently they
That's not my fault. I was
got you
top.
obvious.
I was top dog. Oh, that might have been about me. Just because I dressed like a homeless man while moving the donuts without gloves, because it was impractical based on what they were asking us to do. You had to make a waffle, then you had to pack boxes, then you had to wash dishes. Somehow you can't be pulling gloves on and off doing the whole thing. So I remember getting scolded by germaphobes or people who just have a reasonable fear of germs.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting to me is, like, all right, so there's the generative. I'm a full believer in the generative energy, like, over the consumptive energy. I think people are just healthier when they make. Now, is it fair to say that child rearing is a good enough substitute or a better substitute than the act of making music for you? And is that what makes it not, you don't come from a position of yearning to make it because you have something more fulfilling?
Yeah, and I think that I still have I still have a practice of playing guitar, and making stuff.
Yeah.
I think I would feel pretty. I think I would feel a lot more yearning if I if I wasn't making anything up.
So it's not about the act of making music. It's about the dynamic that was being generated while you were being more publicly facing with the work.
Yeah.
And it seems to have just been a casualty of getting yourself straightened out.
Yeah, a little bit, and just fully giving up on any prospect of like any ideal of like making it or fame.
Because you thought you were going to become famous.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was sure. I was sure that, and on on the spectrum of fame, that the Doozies were going to actually get famous, and that we would kind of ride on their coattails because it wasn't as good.
There is a beauty to the whatever that, I don't even want to call it arrogance of the 20s when you're in your 20s is, but it's so self-assured. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It can be delusional, obviously, as well, but it generates real results alongside that delusion. And
Yeah, I honestly think I honestly think if my friends had been as delusional as I had been, we would have gotten famous.
interesting.
They were realists and knew how delusional it was, and I was literally like pouring every ounce of my creative energy into trying to get the world to look at us, and they didn't care as much. They just wanted to make sound that was interesting to them.
And do they, for the most part, continue to make music?
Yeah.
Interesting. So far more sustainable, perhaps, mentality.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like we're telling it like a VH1 story of great fame and a great fall, but I think it's far more interesting when, I guess for me, it's highlighting how work is made, in the sustainable and the unsustainable sense, because especially when you're young, you don't really care how you get it done. You just care that you get it done and people notice you in the short term. And that doesn't last like 2+ decades, especially if it's unhealthy. But how you maintain an edge, it's also interesting which well you draw from, right? Like I've never been one to make emotional work. So thankfully, I don't put myself in situations to generate drama or depression to then make a song about it. But again, music has that weird dynamic where it's at the service of something perverse often and performative. But I think that's just an interesting topic. Like, I think what happens is the musician and the artist too starts to self-generate, like, oh, here's another 3-month-long relationship that I'll subconsciously make a shitstorm out of so that I have something to complain about and write about. This is this could be a modern symptom too. Obviously, I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't imagine classical musicians needing that particular drive, or devotional artists within a church setting needing that particular drive to continue to do their work. So there is something about the worship of romantic love and individualism that I think clash and come together in a lot of modern singer-songwriters that's particularly poisonous if not handled right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's all you got?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in what sense are you making yeah, go ahead.
No,
I'm
it's
talking
sweet.
with you.
I love what you say.
Oh, thank you. Well, I remember you played some shows here that were very sweet, and the children loved it. And
In Rutherford.
that's right. And that human connectivity is underrated, especially I think when you're seeking larger scale recognition.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure it's a wonder to introduce your children to music or have them introduce it to you.
Yeah. Right now it's Song 2 by Blair on repeat.
Nice.
Which Jules knows as Woohoo. You might know.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
But yeah, it's there are tender moments of like mutual recognition and music with the kids, which is pretty sweet.
From an identity perspective, I assume you woke up thinking to yourself, "I'm a musician" for that stretch of time. Maybe it was a decade, but
Mhm.
what do you? I know. So like Zen again, it's tricky with identity. Often, I feel like very loose and slippery with it. But you wake up today, and what are you?
It's a beautiful question, and um, yeah, that's a beautiful question. I, you know, there's no choice of what I am. Uh, it's it's just being a parent, and there's like and a partner, um, which is just it's so physical. Um, so it's not even it's not even a real like identity that you have to
Assert. Yeah,
work to
yeah,
fulfill, right?
yeah, yeah. It asserts itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Sometimes I get
how have you found that assertion in contrast to the make yourself? It's very one, I think it's divine, but two, it's imposed. It's very anti-modern in that sense. Like, I think that's why parenthood is a struggle often for modern people. Is it's not about customization and choice and what you want when you want it, or it's not even about your individualism. It's about all the opposites. And most humans have always lived through that condition in every aspect of their life. And so there's a shocking shift that occurs.
yeah.
But how do you find that shift? Because it's very different.
Because you don't have kids, right?
No, I do not.
That's like Michael. That's incredible that you have that insight as someone without children.
Well, I have 9 nieces and nephews, and I've watched my 4 brothers grow, and I've watched myself resent them for that initial shift, actually, and for a multitude of reasons, because it's out of selfishness ultimately, but you want your quote unquote brothers back, and then you recognize, oh no, that's completely limiting to who they are. You kind of objectify them in that sense. But what's interesting is the art disposition is in stark contrast often to the parent, because if the artist craves freedom and kind of waiting around for a muse and lack of structure, I don't think that plays too well with instructing and growing a child. But you tell me.
No, it doesn't. And I've even this morning, like I don't do visual art like you, but I did some painting and a little doodle poetry while Jules, did a little painting and played right next to me. So there are these moments of play when you realize, when I think where the cool, what I've learned from both like teaching and just playing with my kids is that all art and music, it's play, right? Like we're still playing with our toys as grown-ups, and I think we can create an identity, and that's a part of the play, right? That's like the dress up, or the the theater element of it. And I think people, it's not to I don't think it's to diminish people's livelihoods and awesome contributions to the world, but I think, and it's not to diminish play either, Does that
Sure.
resonate? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That I think what's interesting to me is how you maintain what I would say is like a professional relationship to play, in which, and Alan Watts talks about this a bit, like the expectation that you're going to plop a child down and tell them to play now, or you yourself are going to sit down and tell yourself to play now in the sense of art making or music making, that you are going to kind of capture that spirit in a kind of net and let it go when you want. I do think there are really, and I say this as a compliment, professional people who manage to do that. I think it's incredibly hard. And I think most people end up in a position of a performative identity of a musician or an artist. And once it's commodified, once there's a way to be comfortable off it, the dangers increase only more to kind of calcify and solidify your prior persona. And then that, of course, limits your ability to grow as a person, I think, outside of that. And and of course, life is long. So I don't look at your life, and I'm sure you don't either, as like it's not like you were just simply a musician and now you're not. Now, there's a great chance you become it again, and you do it in a healthier sense. And I think we often look at our lives on a very small scale and are terrified of the greater challenges that lie in like a long life lived.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because you asked me earlier, do I ever like long have I forget how you phrased it. You phrased it beautifully, like everything you say. But do I see other musicians and long to do it again? Just this past weekend, we were in the Catskills, and Jules was, restless in a thrift store, and I took him out to the parking lot, and we heard this, string music in the distance, and walked toward it, and it was like a 10-piece bluegrass band, and they were just, I guess they were rehearsing in like this little band shell, and they were good, but it was just, they were clearly just normal, just country folk or whatever. And I saw them play, and I was like, oh yeah, like that would be sweet. Like it would be sweet. I would want to be in a bluegrass band, like that plays in a band shell on a humid Sunday afternoon in the Catskills, for no one.
Yeah. I could see missing music more than missing art, because even in the brief time I played bass, there was this type of energy that could happen during playing together that was really special, and I don't know how to say it. It was sensational. Like I don't feel that when I'm drawing. I might feel like 1/10 of it when I finish a book after 3 years. And in that sense, there's like less of a rush, I think, to art making than there is to music making.
In that moment, and maybe you've had this feeling too, even though it seems like you're still working and creating, but it sounds like your relationship to the identity has really evolved in a positive sense. But in that moment, I thought of like this Mary, do you know Mary Oliver?
No.
Poet, essayist. She's like kind of like she's almost sometimes kind of like a punchline, like at the end of a meditation retreat.
Nice. Yeah.
But she has this sense. It's like something like the most regretful people it's something like the most regretful people on earth are those who felt called to be an artist and like felt a creative power, but gave it neither power nor time. When I read that like 3 years ago, after not, making much or in early parenthood, I was like, and it's funny because I think just in this conversation, like I love that you asked you asked, you know, me to talk about what I made, because I had, I and other kind of early retirees of, you know, punk, um, you know, we did give it power and time when it would probably made the most sense to.
Yeah. I would say that, especially in respect to punk, you don't want to exit too late. It has no dignity to it. But yeah, I mean, I understand what she's saying, but I also think we categorize generative energy in the wrong way, in a kind of a industrial sense, that you're either making, and I don't want to get too zen for you now, but you're either making a product or you're not. And if you're not, then there's no generative action at hand. And I think that's wrong. Like, obviously, child rearing is very creative in a literal sense. You're like experiencing an unadulterated, that's a strange pun. You know, there's no distance between you and creation at that point. There's no window pane. It's visceral. It's physical. It's, like you said, it's exhausting. It's uplifting. It transcends, I think, probably typical exhaustion is my guess, that it gives you energies you didn't know and vice versa. So yeah, I mean, I also say that one of the worst things that exists is a failed artist. Like, I think to counter her notion, like to be caught up in that image, and for the world to know that you really aren't very good, and for you to keep doing it, there's something really sad about that. It's probably the saddest thing, actually. Because as much as I think being of utility to your fellow people is also good in a different sense. But in that respect, what would you say? I always like for people to understand who I'm talking to creatively. What were the 3 songs you would have to recommend people listen to from your previous life?
Sunburnt hamburgers.
Of course. Well, that already tells them everything they need to know, actually, right there. What the hell is that? How do I not? I don't even think I know that song.
So that was a song that Scott and I recorded on an album called Fairy Queen, that we recorded in one afternoon, a day after I was mugged in Brooklyn. I was like, I was like shaking with, like, you know, this very mild PTSD for the entire time, and just like drinking vodka, and it was just it was a pure burst of song, and we wrote something like 6 songs, and Sunburnt Hamburgers is just it's just a kind of it's like me, like showing the kind of under like the upside down or under self. And so yeah, Sunburnt Hamburgers. I guess maybe Talking Hands. It's a Flower Girl song. And I don't know if this is online. This is actually something I recorded with Izzy. But you probably remember it. This was Iggy Popcorn.
I think I do recall some of this music, yeah.
And the song called Comfort You. The first and second will be hard. The first and third will be hard to find.
The second will be impossible to avoid. Well, that's what the people need to hear you. And then I'm sure you'll make more music. I'm certain of it.
Oh, thanks, Michael.
Hey, well, you'll make something, right? Even if it's not that. Did you get through the traffic yet?
No, I'm parked.
There's something funny to me about that.
I'm stuck. I'm completely stuck behind this car that's not moving.
Well, good talking to you. Good catching up.
You too, man.
We'll cross paths again.
I sure hope so.
Music by Dory Bavarsky and Mingja Chen. We'll see what happens. Have a good week.